Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the learning of Torah Hashem, Ezras Hashem Yisbarach. As always, we begin with appreciation to TorahAnytime.com for giving us their worldwide network. I mean, literally, this year is heard and viewed by over 1,000 people a week, just on their network alone, and that's besides our appreciation to the global network of Kol HaLashon that's listened to so many Yidden who don't have technology and only use their phone. We also have hundreds of people viewing it on YouTube, and of course the many people that hear it from the great pioneer of Habatzis Torah Communications Network, my subscribers and those that are here joining us at our flagship station at the Agudas Yisrael Beis Yisrael, Beis Zev of Fairways Lakewood. As it happens sometimes, tonight we have three special sponsors. First of all, we have a diamond sponsor. The diamond sponsor is someone who really wants to really support my work, and instead of giving $360, they give $540. So we have a diamond sponsor tonight, Daniel and Lauren Onuna, who are virtual Talmidim of mine, and they are dedicating the share with the hope to Hashem that they should, in the schus of the learning of the masses, they should have Hatzlacha in Ruchnius, in Gashmius, in all areas. The share is also being sponsored by a long-term Talmud of mine who is very active helping Klal Yisrael during the COVID era, Dr. and Mrs. Aaron Glatt, in loving memory of their parents, Anna and Joseph, Chana Bas Meir Avram, and Yosef Nisan ben Yecheskel, and also the Refuah Shalema for Miriam Bela Bas Esther Etel. The shir is also being sponsored anonymously, L'ilui min Ishmas Avram Simcha ben Yechiel Mendel. Again, Avram Simcha ben Yechiel Mendel. The Shama should have an Aliyah, he should have a Lichtige Gan Eden, and be a Melis Yosher for the family, all of us, and all of Klal Yisrael. If you would like to sponsor a share, the way to do it is to text me, as these wonderful people did, at 718-916-3100. That's 718-916-3100. Or, as one of them did, you could email me to rmmwsi@aol.com. Okay. We know that we can get caught up in learning Chumash Bereshis. It's so interesting, with many interesting questions and answers and all kinds of fascinating explanations. But there's one thing that we have to remember, that the aim of Torah means instruction. And the aim of Torah is to instruct us. Chazal tell us that Bereshis has another name. It's called Sefer HaYashar, which literally means the book of the upright. And it's explained that it's called Sefer HaYashar is because it is the study of the Yesharim, of the life, behavior of those that are upright. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. And by extension, also the other great people, Bilhah and Zilpah, and Yosef, and the Shvatim. But it's the study of how they behave so that we should be able to improve our life. And the first idea that I'm going to share with you is a sparkling example of this. People could read it and miss entirely the incredibly practical advice. Vayomer Avram el Lot. Avram said to his nephew. Now Avram had a fatherly responsibility to Lot. Because after all, it was because of his skirmish with Nimrod and his breaking his father's idols that he was brought to the furnace. And in the drama, his brother Haran was thrown into the furnace and burnt. And Lech became an orphan. So Avram not only would marry Haran's daughter, Sarai, Yiska, but he took responsibility for Lech. However, Lech, going together with Avram, became also wealthy, and he had his own shepherds. And as they were traveling, Avram made sure that his animals would be muzzled at all times, and Lech didn't. And Lech's animals wandered into other people's fields and was guilty of theft. Now Lech, he held that since Hashem told Avram that I'm giving you the land, so therefore he didn't have to worry about that, because anyway this is all Avram's land. But Avram maintained that Hashem didn't give it yet. It didn't come the time yet. It wouldn't come the time till we enter into Eretz Yisrael. So they started quarreling. Actually, the shepherds started quarreling. So Vayomer Avram el Lech, Avram said to Lech, Al na sihi riva beini ubeinecha, let not there be fighting between me and you, ubein ro'i ubein ro'yecha, and my shepherds and your shepherds. Ki anoshim achim anachnu. Because we are relatives. And it doesn't look proper that relatives should be fighting. That's Rashi says the simple, even though they weren't brothers, it was an uncle and a nephew. So Rashi says Achim is loosely translated Krivim. They were Krivim. So we see from here a very important lesson, that when relatives cannot get along with one another, it's better for them to separate than to fight. It's very common that siblings fight like cats and dogs. There's a natural rivalry. The Torah says, if you can't get along, it's better to separate than to fight. Now Rashi says that there's another pshat in Anoshim Achim Anochnu, and that is that they looked like one another. That the cluster panim of Lech was the same as Avram. They were, and remember, in those days they didn't age, so they looked like twins. And therefore Avram said, you know, if we're going to fight, and you are maintaining the fight, right? You're being mazik b'machloikis. Since you look like me, people will think that I'm making machloikis. I can't have that. It's interesting that this is the way that the Sefer Taimei HaMikra learns Pshat and Rashi when it says Anoshim Achim Anachnu, that we look like each other. So what that we look like each other? But what Avram was worried about is that if you continue to fight with me, since people won't know that it's you, they'll think that it's me. It'll be a chilul Hashem. It'll look like Avram Avinu is being mazik b'machloikis. That's a big chilul Hashem. So here, you have to understand that we're learning another lesson over here. We're learning that a person who persists in machloikis, now besides that machloikis is the same letters as chelek mavis, it's a portion of death. Besides the fact that the Holy Svarim say that machloikis achas doichab mea parnasis, that one machloikis pushes away 100 livelihoods. besides the fact that if you persist in a fight and you fuel a fight, you're being an over the Issa Deraisa of lo yiyeh kekoirach v'chadasa. You shouldn't be like Kairach and his assemblage. But it's worse than that. It's a chilul Hashem. It's a chilul Hashem to maintain a fight. Now, it's interesting that the Sifsei Chacham, the premier Pirush on Rashi, he learns slightly different. He says that what Avram was worried about was that light will continue not muzzling his animals and will continue to steal from other people's fields. And because he looked like Avram, it will look like Avram is stealing. And since he doesn't say it about the fighting, he says it about the stealing. And he cites this from an earlier commentary, the Nachlas Yaakov. Now I thought about this, and I said, but if that's the case, what does it help if they separate? So if they separate, light will still be purloining other people's fields, and he still looks like Avram. So it won't help to separate. See, according to the Taimya Mikras Pshat, that they were engaging in machlokes, well, if they separate, there won't be any more machlokes. But according to the Nachlas Yaakov's Pshat, what would it help if they separate? Even if they separate, Lloyd still looks like Avram, and he's still going to be taking from other people's fields, and people will think that it's Avram doing it. What does it help to separate? You have to learn that if they separate, then everybody will know that he's Lloyd. Because everybody knows that Avram was very charitable. He had 4 doors to his tent and the 4 different sides. So if they separate, everybody will see, oh, this is light, because he doesn't have the 4 doors to his tent. So if his sheep and his animals go into other people's fields, they'll know that it's not Avram. Now, Hashem Amar El Avram, Hashem said to Avram, Acharei hipared loit me'imai. Hashem spoke to Avram after Lot separated from him. So Rashi right away pounces on this, that the only time Avram had Gilui Shechina, the only time that Avram communed with the Shechina was only after Lot left. While Lot was there, Lot blocked the Shechina from coming to the camp. The Shechina could only come to the camp when it's holy. Baya machanecha kadosh. With Lot there, the Shechina couldn't come. And therefore the pasuk is precise. Vashem Omer El Avram, Achrei hipared Lot me'imai. Hashem spoke to Avram only after Lot left. Now comes the Haflah. The Haflah was the Rebbe of the Chassam Sofer. Haflah was, Chassam Sofer was a Gal Adar. We could just imagine the greatness of the Haflah. The Haflah makes an extraordinary inference over here. The Haflah says, even though Avram knew that Hashem wasn't talking to him, because Lot was there, he didn't send Lot away. Until Lot started engaging in machlokes, Avram didn't send Lot away. He lost out with Shechina. Shechina is everything. Right? The biggest hana in the next world is Lehanais Miziv HaShechina. That's the beginning of the Mesilas Yesharim. The pot of gold at the end of the Reimia was to benefit from the Shechina. But as long as Lot didn't engage in machlokes, Avram is not sending him away. Says the Haflah, this is something that we're going to talk about a lot in next week's parsha. Having guests is more than being in proximity to the Shechina. Now we're going to learn that out clearly the way the parsha starts next week. Everybody's going to talk about it. That Hashem came to visit Avram when he was ill in the 3rd day of the circumcision. He's 100 years old. He had a surgery. Hashem came, and then the 3 Arabs came, and Avram says to Hashem, and addresses Hashem, and tells him, please Hashem, Vayomer Adonai, this is according to the Pshat that Adonai is holy, Al no savar me'al avdecha, please don't leave me, but I got to take care of the Arabs. So he put Hashem on hold, he pressed the hold button to take care of these Arab lookalikes. Because Gedoyla Achnas is Archim Yosem Mekabalas Bnei Hashchina. But says the Aflo, we learn it here. Avram took care of Lot, and he's not sending him away until Machlaik. Machlaikis, that's the end of the game. Machlaikis, you gotta pull the plug. On Machlaikis, you gotta pull the plug. I always told my children, you have to know, some people are allergic to penicillin, some people are allergic to a bee bite. We're allergic to Machlaikis. Machlaikis is 20,000 volts. Machlaikis, we learned in Parashas Kairach that even toddlers die from the sin of Machlaikis. The ground swallowed up even babies in cribs. But until then, he didn't send him away. That's the greatness of Achnas Sarchim. That's how great it is. Now, Rashi uses a very strong language over here. Rashi, when he says that Hashem didn't talk to Avram all the while that Lot was with him, Rashi says, Kol zman she'harasha imay. As long as this wicked man was with him, the Shekhinah didn't come. Strong language. Russia. Why do you refer to Lot as a Russia? This is Sarah's brother. This is Haran's son, Haran that went into a fire. Calls him a Russia. Calls Mansha Russia Imai. So, again, the premier Pirush on Rashi, the Sifsei Chachamim, explains why does Rashi call him a Rasha? Because Rashi earlier said that Lot, when Avram asked him to separate, Lot looked at Sodom and chose Sodom. Now Sodom was very steeped in immorality. So Lot saw that they were shtufei zima, that they were immersed in immorality, and he still chose to go there. Now you have to know, the world already knew how bad immorality was. The world knew that the generation of flood was destroyed because ki hishchus kol darko al pnei haaretz. Even the animals didn't get in unless they were animals that were pure of depravity. Otherwise, they didn't get into the ark. And yet, knowing all of this, Lot still chose to go to Sodom. And here we have again, remember we were saying Torah is instruction. It's a Sefer HaYashar. When one chooses a bad environment, that's rishus. You know, there are people that want to go where they could live without pressure, where they could do what they want. That's what Lot wanted. It's very, very restrictive to live with Avram. Avram was a holy man. It's not easy to live with Avram. He says, get me out of here. Sodom, they do whatever they want over there. That's where I want to live. There are many people that want to escape the rigors of peer pressure. No, I want to be able to go where I don't have to worry. I don't have to worry how I dress. I don't have to worry what I look at. I want to go where nobody is watching me. So Rashi says that's why he says, calls him a Rasha. Says a Sifsei Chacham because he chose to go to Stein. Actually, this idea that a person that chooses to go to the wrong atmosphere is a Rasha is a Beferish Gemara. The Gemara says if there's two paths, one passes by the brothel, by the zonos, and one doesn't. The Gemara says if he has a choice and he takes the path of the brothel, the Gemara says, Rasha, he's a Rasha. It's a Farish Gemara. I was once in a CVS. It was in the summer, and I was walking, and I had to go to the pharmacist in the back. And there's a few aisles. You could go on a few aisles. And on one of them, there were two girls that were hardly wearing anything. And they were walking. They were wearing what we call short shorts. And I started walking down that aisle. And then I said, you mean I'm going to be walking behind them the whole aisle till I get to the back? I could go on another aisle. If I take this aisle, I'm a Rasha. That's what we're learning over here. So I quickly got out of the aisle and went down another aisle. You take this aisle, it's the same. It's not that it's shorter. If you have one aisle where there's immorality and one aisle where there isn't, and you take the aisle with immorality, that's a Rasha. That's what we're learning here. It's calling him a Rasha. It's a very big lesson. Now you'll say, but why do you need that reason? Why don't you say that it's because he pastured in other people's fields? The Gemara says that a roya, a stam shepherd, is pasaledus because he lets his flock go in other people's fields. And it says, al toshes Rasha aid. You can't have a Russian aid. So you see, stealing is also a Rasha. So what do we need this reason of immorality? It could be that because Lech had that idea that the land was already given to Avram, maybe for that alone he wouldn't have been called a Rasha. Once we've opened up the Rashi says, Sifsei Chacham refers it, Rashi says there's another reason why Lot was a Rasha. Because the Pasuk says a language that Vayhi ben Nosam Mikedem, who was traveling from the east. Rashi says Hisiya Atzmai Mikadmunai Shel Olam. Light removed himself from the creator of the world, the one that was in the beginning of the world. He said, Afshi, I don't need, Loi Avram, I don't need Avram, Loi Be'Elokav, I don't need his God. So he was kaifer in Hashem. Now you have to understand, why did Light say Afshi? I mean, don't forget, Light observed Avram come out of a Kivshin Eish. I mean, and he knew the story of the flood. He knew the story of the Tower of Babel. What happened? This is the oldest story in the book, and it's something that we have to be very careful with. Light became wealthy. V'gam Light, because he traveled with Avram, Light also became wealthy. Once you become wealthy, Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivat. Yeshurun becomes fat and it kicks. When we become wealthy, we don't need God. You know, if you don't know how you're going to pay your mortgage, If you don't know how you're going to buy food, and God help me, you got a lot of money in the bank. Yafshi, I don't need Avraham. Look at me, I'm loaded. I don't need it. It's a very big worry. Very big worry. That's why money is a very dangerous thing. Ger Rebbe, they say, used to tell his children that he doesn't want them to become rich. They say that when he would talk that way, the Hasidim would move away, that it shouldn't affect them. But money could be very dangerous. It could really turn a person's head. I don't want to talk about this too long, but once we're talking about the definition of Russia, so first of all, we have to know if you raise your hand against someone, you're a Russia. And then we learn from Moshe Rabbeinu, when he spoke to Dasan and Aviram, and he said, Russia, lama sake es reyecha. Lama sake means, why do you attempt to hit? Even raising a hand at somebody, to raise a hand at a wife, that's a rishis derishis. It's the lowest type of fellow. But I'm going to tell you another definition of Russia, which is going to be a novelty to you. I know that this is going to be a big novelty. But it's important to know. There's a phrase in Shas, Rishei Anovim, wicked grapes. Wicked grapes. What are wicked grapes? Wicked grapes are stunted grapes that remain on the tree and don't ripen. And Rashi says, why are they called Russia? Because they don't live up to their potential. A person that goes through life and doesn't try to live up to their potential, they're on cruise control. That's a type of rishis. You know it from Rashi. It says, Risha Anovim. We have to always ask ourselves, am I living up to my potential? There are people that have such bright minds, but they spend it on chess, on Scrabble, on bridge, on Sudoku, on computer games. Such brilliant minds. We have to ask ourselves, are we living up to our potential? Now here's an interesting thing. Vayomer la'Avram, Hashem gives grim news to Avram. Yodaya say that you should surely know, Ki ger zaracha be'eretz lo Elohim. Your descendants will be strangers in a land that's not theirs. Va'avodim, they'll be enslaved. V'inu oisam, and they'll be afflicted arba me'ah shana, 400 years. That's the nevuah of the bris bein habesarim. Now, of course, we know that this begs the question. We weren't enslaved 400 years. We weren't even in Mitzrayim 400 years. We were only in Mitzrayim 210 years. The famous simon is Redu. Redu, to go down to Egypt, Redu is B'gematria 210. Reish Daled Vav is 210. So what does it mean that we were... Now we know that the 400 years from the birth of Yitzchak till we went out of Mitzrayim was 400 years. But we weren't enslaved. First of all, we were only enslaved for 117 years. And the Inui, the Kushi Ashibid, was only from when Miriam is Mar, bitter. So only from when Miriam was born, it was only 86 years. So what does it mean 400 years? As a matter of fact, when the Jews originally did not want to leave Mitzrayim, when Moshe Rabbeinu said to leave, they didn't want to leave because they said, what are you talking about? We're supposed to be here 400 years. We're not here 400 years. 30 years before, when 30,000 Ephraimites went out and they were slaughtered by the Philistines, the Jews didn't want to leave. So what kind of a prophecy is this? And in Agadah we make a big mention. Baruch Shemer Avtachos Yisrael. Hashem kept this promise. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chishev as Haketz La'asais. He figured out the end exactly. What exactly? So of course, there's two stock answers to this question. The first answer is that the work was so intense. We had to make 600 bricks a day, and we had to make the bricks. The Kushi Ashibid made it that we were able to do in 116 years, 400 years worth of work. And actually the Vilna Gaon says the famous hint to that. It says, Vayemoru es chayehem, he embittered their lives, and the musical trop on top of Vayemoru es chayehem is Vayemoru es chayehem is Kadma v'azla, which means that the Geula was Kadam v'azl, it came quicker because of Vayemoru es chayehem. And the Gra, with his incredible genius, finishes off with a flourish that Kadma v'azla is exactly B'gematria 190, so that instead of 400, we went out 190 years early. That's Kadma v'azla, because 190 plus 210 is 400. So that's one pshat. The other pshat is the population explosion, that every woman gave birth, Shisha B'keres Echad, 6 in one womb. Every woman had 6 tuplets. So there was so many people that we did the work of 400 years in 116 years. Those are the two answers. However, the Tamei HaMikra adds a very fascinating idea. When a person has a tzara, one of the things that we do in order to mitigate the distress, sometimes somebody is very sick, lo yaleinu, one of the things that we do is we meshana es Hashem. We change their name. Says the Tamei HaMikra, look carefully, this gezerah was given to who? Vayomer la'Avram. He said it to Avram, Aleph Vez Reish Mem. Yodoya Seder Kigeya Zaracha. When Hashem changed Avram's name to Avraham, that mitigated the gezerah. It was Mishana Es Hashem. Just like Avram and Sarai couldn't have children, but Avraham and Sarah could have children. Right? Same as Stagninus Shalai. Don't look at the stargazing. I'm going to change your names. Just like he changed their names and they were able to have children, he changed the name and that mitigated the gezerah of 400 years. And he makes a very interesting point. The Gemara tells us in Masechtas Brachos a very interesting din. Kol hakoyrei Avram. Whoever calls Avram, over ba'aseh, transgresses a positive commandment. You're not supposed to call, we're not the children of Avram, we're the children of Avraham. If you call him Avram, you're over ba'aseh. What's so bad if you call him Avram? If you call him Avram, it's like you want to bring back the Gezeres Hadin, the Midas Hadin that was changed by changing the name. Once you change the name, it changed the Gezerah of the Abba Me'ashana. Malki Tzedek Melech Shalem. Now we know Malki Tzedek Melech Shalem was none other than Shem, the son of Noach. And yes, he was a big kohen. He's the one that offered all the karbanos after the teva. And Hashem smelled the reach nichayach and promised not to destroy the world. Shem was a very great part of the history of mankind. So it says, Malki Tzedek Melech Shalem, when he met Avram after his battle with Nimrod, Hoitzi lechem v'yayin, as it says, you give to people who are fatigued, who come back from battle. He gave him bread and wine. V'hu kayin lekel elyon, and he was a kayin. He was the kayin. Shem was a kayin. And by the way, the Baal Turim says, and the Dazikanim says it as well. Melech Shalem is Rasha Teva Shem, right? Melech Shalem Mem Shin is Shem. But the great Rabbi Dr. Twersky, Zeichat Tzadik Livracha, my Rebbetzin Shoshi told me that she heard a interview with Dr. Twersky's second wife. And she was saying that he lived till 90 and he wrote 90 Sfarim. He was one of the most prolific men of our generation, if not the most prolific. 90 Sfarim. So, Rabbi Dr. Twersky said that when they got to this parsha, his saintly father used to always tell him this pshat. And although he knew it, he used to tell it to him every year. He used to tell him that the great Rav Meir Miprimishlan met once the great Reb Shlomo Kluger. Remember I told you about Reb Shlomo Kluger, that he wrote 200 svar. He used to write with a pen in both hands at the same time. When I learned Masechtas Nedarim, I learned his Nidre's reason. That sefer alone is like it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's only one of 200 svarim. But that sefer alone is a lifetime's work. So anyway, when Rameir ben Primishlan, the great Rameir ben Primishlan, met Reb Shlomo Kluger, they spoke in learning for hours. And when they were leaving, Rameir ben Primishlan, when you leave somebody that you remember what the last thing that they talked about. When they were departing from each other, Rameir ben Primishlan told him a word on this pasuk. He says, Shem met Avram, Avram met Shem, and the pasuk says that they both learned from each other. Avram was the great man of Chesed. So he taught Malki Tzedek Melech Shalem that he should give lechem v'yayin, that he should give bread and wine. On the other hand, Shem was a kohen. And therefore, v'hu kohen lekel elyon, he imparted to Avram the idea of being a kohen, which Avram would later use to offer Yitzchak on the Akedah. And the point that Rameir Miprimishlan was making is that even these great men made it a point to learn from each other. Mikol melamdai hiskalti. From all my teachers I become wise. It's to teach Ezel Chacham Haloi made Mikol Adam. He said that they were impressing upon us that each of these great people made sure to learn from one another. How important is it that we should always try to learn from others? There are people that foolishly, they meet a great person and they don't stop talking. They want to impress the great person. It's really a waste. Really a waste. Ramintz in his new sefer, he writes that once the great Rav Ruderman met the elderly, great Talmud Chacham, Rabbi Chatzkel Abramsky. Rabbi Chatzkel Abramsky kept on talking, pshatim, and didn't give Rav Ruderman a minute to talk. And Rav Mintz asked Rav Ruderman later if he felt funny. And he said, no, I wanted to listen to Rav Chatzkel. Another pearl from Rav Chatzkel. A person to have the opportunity to learn from great people. Don't spend the time when you meet a great person talking. You meet a great person, spend the time listening. Do we see the fulfillment of a prophecy in this week's Parsha, where it talks about Yishmael, the father of the Arabs. V'hu yiyeh pera adam. He's going to be a wild man. As the Chavetz Chaim says, a Arab that's a lawyer is a wild lawyer. An Arab that's a doctor is a wild doctor. He's going to be a wild man. You won't be able to tame him. That's why all the talk of making peace with the Arabs, it's impossible. It's impossible. The Torah says he's a wild man. He's not going to be tamed. It's impossible. To make temporary peace, but it's not going to be a lasting peace. Yodai bakol. His hand will be into everyone. V'yad kol bay. Now here, this is a remarkable prophecy. You have to realize, the Targum says, what does it mean, v'yad kol bay? That everyone's hand will be in him, says the Targum. V'yada de kol b'nei enasha yehein tzrichen lei. All people will need him. Now we know that it refers to oil. Now we know that. At the time, this wasn't known. But it's right there in the Targum. V'yad kol by, everybody will need him. V'al pnei kol echav yishkain. He will live with everyone. Now again, even 25 years ago, even maybe 15 years ago, we didn't understand what this means. Now we're looking at the world, and the entire world is becoming Arab. Do you know that within a few blocks of the Eiffel Tower, do you know how many mosques there are within a few blocks of the Eiffel Tower? Do you know how Muslim it is within a few blocks from the Eiffel Tower? Do you know what's happening in London, that they're able to marshal like 250,000 people like nothing for a pro-Palestinian rally? You know what's going on in Australia? And you know what's going on in Flatbush? Few blocks from Torah Vodaas is Palestine. You see the entire Torah, you see it becoming before your eyes. There's more to talk about this, much more. Maybe we'll talk more about it for the Shabbos table. But I don't want to get caught up because time is flying. I made a bracha already. Vayisa light mikedem, vayipardu Ishmael ochiv. They separated one from the other. So the Balaturim, who knows these things, says if you look at the last letter of this 4-word sequence, mikedem, Vayipardu Ishmael, the last letter spells Shalom. Mikedem is a mem, Vayipardu is a vav, Ish is a shin, and Me'al is a lamed. So those are the letters of Shalom. And the Balaturim says that sometimes peace is accomplished by separation. You know, there are people that say, oh, you're not peace-loving. You have to know that peace is sometimes achieved by separation. But you have to know when this is. So like, for example, Yaakov said, Esav said, let's travel together. And Yaakov said, no. Nisav and Elcha l'negdecha. I'll travel parallel you. We're not traveling together. We're not traveling together. You have to know that sometimes separation is peace. There's a Chassam Sofer. What a powerful Chassam Sofer. It says in the pasuk, Shalom Rav la'oav eisarasecha. There is great peace to those that love your Torah, ve'ein lamoi michshol, and in them there is no stumbling. So it says the Chassam Sofer, the Gadol Adar, Shalom Rav, great peace, abundant peace, is Gematria 578. Machlokes, without the Vav, Machlokes is 578. How could Machlokes and Shalom Rav be the same Gematria? Because sometimes a division is the greatest peace. See, the Chassam Sofer in his day battled the Reform. And he knew we couldn't live together with the Reform. And that peace with the Reform is not good. Just going to take people away from Yiddishkeit. But he said that's only to make a separation. That's only the license of a Talmud Chacham. Shalom Rav la'ov eisarasecha. Then ve'ein lamoi michshol. Normally, machlokes is poison. Talmidei Chacham know when you have to separate. So, for example, it had a great impact on me. In the generation before me, 11 great rabbis, including Rabbi Aaron Kotler, Rabbi Eliezer Silver, Rav Moshe, 11 great rabbis signed that no Orthodox Jew was allowed to be in a group that had with it Reform or conservative Jews. Now that made a big difference to me, because if I wanted to be a chaplain in a hospital and get a free medical insurance, which would have been a lot of money, I had to join the New York Board of Rabbis. And the New York Board of Rabbis had Reform and conservative. So according to this psak of the 11 great rabbis, you can't join the New York Board of Rabbis. There was a time that the OU belonged to it. And because of that, when the OU asked me to speak by an OU convention, in those days, it doesn't apply today anymore. The Novominsker Rebbe, who was a member of the Moetzes Gedolei Torah, told me I couldn't speak at their convention. But only great people could do this, because Shalom Rav is Gematria Machlokes. Sometimes you have to make a division to save people. Many people were lost because they connected themselves to Reform Jewry. What happened was that they connected themselves to Reform Jewry. Then they sent their children to Solomon Schechter schools, and the children got lost. They got lost. They even wandered into beliefs such as patrilineal descent. So you have to know, there are times that Shalom Rav is machlokes, but only a great tzaddik could know this. Now, I just want to tell you that this pasuk that the Chassam Sofer is mentioning, again, I don't want to get too involved in this, because then we could spend the whole night on this. But this is a Gemara in Brachos on Daf Samech Daled. Shalom Rav la'ov eisarasecha. That's what it says. Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'olam. That's what it means. Shalom Rav Loive Sarasecha, that Talmidei Chachamim increase peace in the world. Now, although I think that the simple explanation of this, how did Talmidei Chacham increase peace in the world? Well, if a person is schooled with the rules of Lo Sisna Es Achicha B'Levavecha, not to hate your brother in your heart, if a person is schooled with the rule of Lo Sitar, not to bear a grudge, you're not allowed to bear a grudge, you're not allowed to remember. Somebody is schooled with the rule of B'Tzedek Tishpat Amisecha, that you have to judge someone favorably. Somebody is schooled with V'Hafta L'Reach Kameicha. If somebody is schooled with Lo Sachmai, don't desire what's not yours, such a person is Ma'abim Shalom Ba'im. That's a simple pshat. But they say over from the great, we just mentioned it, we say over from the great Reb Chatzkel Abramsky. The Reb Chatzkel Abramsky said that if somebody is saturated with Torah and his life is happy with Torah, he's happy, then the petty things that bother most people don't bother him. Slip off him. He's just too happy. It just doesn't bother him. You know, when a person is not so happy and somebody insults him, somebody takes what should have been his, that becomes very important. It looms very significant. But if a person is so saturated with the pleasures of learning, of Chumash and Gemara and Mishnayos and Chok and of silly things, that's how he learns Talmidei Chacham Ma'abim Shalom Ba'im. I once told you another pshat, and again, I don't want to get carried away. But a lot of times there's fights because people don't know how to talk to each other. They don't know how to reason. They don't know how to navigate differences because they're not thinking straight. But a person who learns Gemara for years and gets a Talmudic mind, they get a logical mind. They learn how to think. So with people that know how to think, you can navigate. That's Talmidei Chacham Ma'abim Shalom Ba'im. But let's go further. Goodness. Hein li loy nasata zera. Avram said, you didn't give me a child. I want to tell you two stories. The first one is related by Rav Zilberstein in his incredible Baruch Nafshi. It's a story he heard from a Dr. Brooks. Dr. Brooks told him that there was a couple that were childless for many, many years. And he checked them both. There was nothing wrong with them. So when he told them this, they knew, being mature religious Jews, that there had to be something in their past that was blocking them from having a child. So they both fought, and the husband remembered that when he was in yeshiva, he was a Mitzuyan, he was an excellent student, and he was honored to be the Gabbai. They called up people to the Torah. That was a big honor in yeshiva, you know. And there was a boy that was a terrible stutterer. And he knew from the Gabbai before that they don't give this boy an aliyah because he's embarrassed. So he too never gave the boy an aliyah. But it came a Purim. On Purim he felt that he could give him an aliyah. So he gave him an aliyah on Purim. And the boy stood there for lengthy minutes and couldn't get the words out of his mouth. And he was deadly ashamed. He had such shame that he ended up leaving the yeshiva. He ended up failing in business. His life was a wreck. Now, of course, this boy didn't know it, but he remembered the shame. And he said, you know, maybe that's stopping us from having our own family. So he located the man, who is now a mature man, And he asked him for mechila. And the man looked at him and screamed at him. Moichel you? Are you kidding? You ruined my life. I'm not moichel you in this world. I'm not moichel you in the next world. So he saw that it wasn't the time. He left. But he came back. And he fell down to the ground and he begged him for mechila. And he offered him $50,000 to be moichel. When he said that, the man realized that he was sincere. And he said, I see that you're sincere. I don't need your money. I'm moichel you. 9 months later, they had a child. You know, I told you that Bereshis is the letters Yorei Beishis, to be afraid of embarrassing someone. Oy, Malbim Pnei Chaveroi, Barabim. I'm going to tell you the next story. The next story I saw in a sefer, L'Sadein Bavosecha. In this story, a couple had a boy, one child. And then 20 years went and they didn't have any more children. Again, the doctor said, there's nothing wrong with you. You had a child, there's nothing wrong with you. So they understood that there's dvarim begav. There has to be something that they're doing wrong. So they remembered that when their child was a young boy, they lived on the second floor. And on the first floor, under them lived a widow. And the widow would keep on coming up, knocking on the door, that their son's footsteps, he's running around, is bothering her, is keeping her up, is getting on her nerves. And they didn't pay attention to her. I mean, what did they have to have a child? He's a healthy child, he's living normal. What are they supposed to do? And she would come constantly and complain. And they didn't pay attention. She's such a crazy lady, you know. People. Anyway, they thought now that maybe the tsar that they gave to a widow maybe is blocking them from having other little children. So they tried to locate the widow. And they found out that she died. So, as it says in Halacha, they took 10 people. The story goes that first they took 9 people, and then they said maybe it's 10 people besides you. So they took 10 people, and they asked formal mechila 3 times. 9 months later, they had a child. The next year, they had another child. And the next year, they had another child. Now, this story resonated with me because I remember that my mother, Zilzan Gesund, she lived in an apartment building in Borough Park, a very beautiful apartment, with my father first, and then with Saba. She lived there for 50 years. But they moved in on top, a family with 8 children, and she couldn't take the noise. And it ultimately ended that she had to move away, and she moved to Staten Island near me, and then eventually moved here to Lakewood. And I'm not saying it to blame anybody, but it resonated with me. We have to know that Hilchas Shchenim, there's a parak about it in Masechtas Bava Basra, Lo Yachbar. Hilchas Shchenim, how to be a neighbor. It could be a very dangerous thing. It could have a lot of consequences. Here's a family, they have a child that likes to play the drums. He's playing the drums after 11 o'clock in the night. He's keeping everybody up. Or here's a family, they like to cook. They're a tenant. They like to cook with heavy cumin. The landlord can't tolerate the smell of such heavy cumin. There's laws of Shchenim. Here you see they were blocked from having a child 20 years, They should have figured out, they should have gotten a carpet, they should have brought their child heavy slippers, they should have showed the almana that they're trying. This is what I said about being the Sefer HaYosher. So I talked about being Torah is instruction. We have to know that there's repercussions and ramifications from what we do. I can't believe it. It's already an hour. Okay, there's always for the Shabbos table. I want to thank our three sponsors tonight. Our diamond sponsor, Daniel Onuna, and his wife Lauren. And we're learning anonymously Lila Nishmas Avram Simcha ben Yechiel Mendel by Dr. Aaron Glatten family for their parents, Lila Nishmas Anna and Joseph, Chanabas Meir Avram, and Yosef Nisim ben Yecheskel, and Refuah Shalema for Miriam Bela Bas Esther Etel. Again, if you want to sponsor a share, 718-916-3100, rmmwsi@aol.com. Remember, this year now is already archived Wednesday night, and if you want to get an email immediately, you could let me know. And also, there is another shir called For the Shabbos Table, which I usually broadcast tomorrow night, and then put on the system. And we do have the daf at 8 p.m. by going to zoomdaf.com, meeting code all capital RMMW, Rabbi Moshe Meir Weiss. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.